It's almost like Mizuhara is just like this beautiful placeholder that makes Rent-A-Girlfriend run for an indefinite period of time. I think that's what Mizuhara represents to the story. Let's drink apple cider. To Rent-A-Girlfriend, Chapter 218. Whoop! Well, alright, so Chapter 218 was a hot mess, okay? It was a hot mess. Everywhere on the Reddit, everyone pretty much hates Chapter 218. All the leaks, everyone hated, and all this type of stuff. And the main reason people hated it, at least from what I gathered, was that it was because Kazuya was having perverted thoughts about Umi ex Mizuhara and was feeling super bad and regressing to his old simpish self. Yes, I said simpish. I don't even know if that's an adjective, but if it's not, it should be, okay? But anyways, I think that's essentially what the problem was, but after I read Chapter 218, I don't really think that was the problem, because if you remember in Chapter 1, Kazuya, literally in the first chapter, the first thing that Kazuya says is, I got dumped. And the first thing we see in Chapter 218 is, I got dumped. So, it's very within character for Kazuya to say, I got dumped, obviously, but also to imagine, his lover with someone else. If we remember this stranger from Chapter 1 with Mommy, now we get something similar with 218. So, this isn't really anything new for Kazuya, so I don't think that is really that big a deal. But I think the problem with Chapter 218 is what I like to call this sort of whiplash effect. The first half, which I would consider pages 2 through 14, were, they were so well written. Kazuya was actually, basically, Kazuya goes through, this short cycle of grief, but he finally starts to realize the truth of the reality that maybe he has actually been rejected by Mizuhara and he has to move on from that. I don't think that there's a problem with that. I think that's 100% okay that he has sort of moved on from this. And there's just so many wonderful things that happen in the first half. But then we get to the second half, which it's insultingly bad. Okay? It's awful. I mean, it's a train wreck, train crash, car crash, whatever it's something that has to do with some vehicle falling off a bridge or some person falling off a bridge. I mean, he literally chucks his story into the ocean. I mean, it's awful. Because on the one hand, Kazuya having these perverted thoughts about Umi and Mizuhara and all this type of stuff makes sense, because Kazuya has a jealous nature, and that this is something that we saw from Chapter 1. But that's also the issue. Kazuya is going back to Chapter 1 behaviors in Chapter 218. Let's get into some of the details. Guys, this panel right here is one of the most beautiful panels in Rent-A-Girlfriend for me. When I first found this story, I could relate a lot with Mizuhara and some of the struggles that he has with women and connecting with people, and this sort of ride, this fantasy ride as he's trying to play his chances with one of the most beautiful women he's ever seen that he rents. It's impossible. He wants to connect with this woman, Mizuhara, beyond the pay, beyond the session, beyond a client. He wants to have a real relationship with Mizuhara. And I think that this is a beautiful story at its core. I think at its core, Rent-A-Girlfriend is a beautiful story, because who doesn't want to follow a man who is trying to achieve something that should be impossible? But we see, from Chapter 1 to 218, he goes through this roller coaster ride, but now in the first several pages of chapter 218, we see him sort of coming to this realization that maybe it is over. He stops crying on the table and wailing around on the ground. He's actually taking a deep breath and thinking, that was a good run. And what does he say? I like the imagery of him sort of being on the ground, and he slowly raises himself up. So he's recognizing all of these things. He's coming to his senses. This is what's happening as in the action of raising his body. His head going from horizontal to vertical. He's thinking straight, thinking clearly, and he says, "It's all over." Beautifully represented. I wish it was like a full panel or something like that, but it was gorgeous, and seeing that imagery was so encouraging to me. When I saw that panel, I just thought, what could be so bad about this chapter? This is a Kazuya maturing, and it was wonderful. And this is like one of my favorite panels in the whole thing. I mean, it's gorgeous on its own. And then we go into him thinking a little bit more about maybe it's over with Mizuhara. But maybe that's not so bad, And then we get into this panel here, where we see Ruka connecting with Kazuya, and sort of Kazuya thinking about how stupid he's been by not seeing the love that's right in front of him. This cute girl that likes him, that cares about him, that is very honest with him. Unlike Mizuhara, who's been so confusing, and the whole thing has just been drama. What I mean to say here is their connection is real, and the only one that hasn't sort of been in the game is Kazuya. And the only reason that Ruka is acting crazy is because Kazuya will not reciprocate the feelings that she has. It's another question of whether he should, or she's being too forceful or whatever. But I think it's very interesting that Kazuya is seeing Ruka for who she is, not some enemy to his love with an impossible Mizuhara that's almost contained within this renting client relationship, but it's something that's real. Kazuya says, what kind of idiot can't enjoy the happiness that's right in front of him? Seeing Kazuya realize that, I think, is beautiful. And we get this beautiful panel where Ruka says, "I love you." And it's so beautiful. It's drawn so well, and I love this scene for so many reasons. It's just, I don't know, just the art is incredible. The realizations that Kazuya is having, his maturity, from 1 to 218, 217 chapters, it's great. I want to add the part where Kazuya says, "A stud like Umi-kun is 5 billion times more suited to her than a schmuck like me." I just want to throw this out there. He's not entirely wrong. I went back to the chapters where Umi sort of confessed his feelings to Mizuhara. Not really a confession, but he asked her to dinner. And Mizuhara rejected Umi because of Kazuya by saying, "I don't like him, but I don't not like him," which is really confusing and sort of a non-answer, and she runs away from Umi. Now, if we know anything about Mizuhara, we know that she is trying to break into the industry, right? She's trying to break into the acting industry, and if she really wanted to break into the industry, it makes more sense for Mizuhara to date Umi than anyone else. I mean, think about it. He's a nice guy. He's also a nice looking guy. Not gonna lie, I mean, he is kind of a stud. Also, he's already popular in the industry. He already has a good presence in social media. So it's like, I mean, if you're trying to work on your career, it's almost a no-brainer to, well, even if you don't date Umi, spend a lot of time with Umi. His circles, remember the girlfriend in the Tiger's Den or whatever it was called? Literally, this guy is at parties where the biggest, some of the biggest upcoming stars are. For any sane upcoming artist, they would spend as much time with them as possible. Also, Umi is interested in him, but Mizuhara put a nail in her own coffin with that by rejecting him. Why? Like, why? Like, if Mizuhara likes Kazuya, be with Kazuya. If she doesn't, and when she wants to focus on the industry, just spend more time with Umi platonically. If she likes Umi, just date Umi. He's single. Also, seeing these panels, these explicit panels, which I will not show on screen without any kind of blurs or at all. I don't know. You've read the chapter if you're watching this, and if you haven't, what do you? I don't know what I'm saying right now. But anyways, you've probably read the chapter. Mizuhara literally rejected Umi, like a hard rejection, like about as hard as you can get rejected. She literally just like sprinted away, like she always does. Like, I don't even know what's Mizuhara is thinking, but she rejected Umi super hard. Now, obviously, Kazuya doesn't know that, but since we, the audience, know that, I find it hilarious that Kazuya is dreaming up this world where Mizuhara's in love with Umi, and he's doing all these actions and all this type of stuff, which shall not be named. But, like, no, like, that's not gonna happen. Like, Mizuhara doesn't want Umi either. Reiji is just giving us the runaround. We don't know what Mizuhara wants. She's rejecting everyone, but not accepting anyone, and we don't even know what's going on in her mind. It's almost like Mizuhara is just like this beautiful placeholder that makes Rent-A-Girlfriend run for an indefinite period of time. I think that's what Mizuhara represents to the story. But anyways, this panel here where Kazuya goes, I felt a lot of sympathy for Kazuya here. I don't really know whether to call this scene good or bad, but I think, it's one of those, like, I get where Kazuya's coming from here, because he does have to go through this grief cycle in order to, like, move on from Mizuhara. And, this would be hard for anybody. I mean, just think about it. You've been in love with someone for a year and a half. Even if you're more mature or whatnot, you're gonna have some sort of expression of your emotions, or else, you wouldn't necessarily be, in the healthiest position. It's healthy to, cry and stuff like this. But I think it's not that this panel happens. It's not that Kazuya cries. That's not my problem. The issue is that you can't tease the audience with the first half of a chapter being incredible. Being an incredible, mature realization, moving on from something, starting to enjoy time with his friends, and see Ruka maybe as a lover in the future. All this really, really good, healthy stuff. And then go backwards 218 chapters to Simp Boy. You can't do that in the same chapter and expect people not to hate it. Reiji, if you're watching this, you did a great job with the first half, but then you ruined it in the second half. Like, pick one. Are we going to be going through grief and sadness and jealousy? Or are we going to be mature, thoughtful, considerate, and reasonable adults that are moving through the trauma that we have, or the bad experiences that we have. You have to choose one and be consistent. I don't even mind if he did that, in his room afterwards, after everything is said and done. But don't tease us this story where we get to, you could really run with that. Like, what's the aftermath of Mizuhara's rejection of Kazuya? See, that's what happens when you do this in the first half of a chapter. Like, your audience is thinking, like, hey, this is over. It's all over. What's next? If it's over, what's next? But no, you whiplash. We just switched 180 right there, like right in the middle of the chapter, to going backwards to see a Kazuya that's acting the same. That's the issue I have with chapter 218. With that being said, I'm just going to be done. I don't want to turn to a rant. I probably already did, but, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to my patrons for supporting me. I've sort of been all over the place lately, but this year, it's a new year. Going to be getting back on the channel. So thank you so much, and you already know what time it is. Let's get it. Let's go. It's time for that trash type. Let's get it.